Welcome to Socialcast, your go-to place to learn about marketing, the latest social media news, and insights. Brought to you by Social Bakers.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next podcast episode. Today, we speak to Rand Fishkin. Rand is obviously very well known for co-founding Moz, but now becoming increasingly well known for starting SparkToro. We speak about SparkToro briefly, but we spend most time discussing what the new business as usual, or what we call the new normal, looks like across marketing departments, and how our decisions now will shape our success in the future. Without further delay, let's hear it from Rand. And we're live with Rand Fishkin. Rand, welcome to the podcast. How are you holding up? How are you doing?
Doing well. Thank you for having me, Mantas.
Yeah, it's nice to have you back. Been a couple of months, maybe more than a month now, near 2 months since we were speaking to you. And we spoke about a lot of the things that were going to change in the world ahead of us. And many have changed. And I think I definitely want to talk to you about this, but also a little bit about what has been going on in your life. So obviously, congratulations on launching SparkToro. That is huge.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not great timing, but I'm very excited to hopefully weather this storm and then come out the other side and see what we can do.
Actually, maybe if you don't mind, can we actually start with SparkToro, and if maybe you can give the audience a brief explanation, and if I may ask, so why SparkToro now, and why is it relevant now? And maybe it doesn't have to be just in the context of this pandemic, but what does it mean to me as a marketer right now, and how will it change how I work?
Sure, yeah. So let's see. I'll start with your first question around what is it? It's so SparkToro is a software tool. It's free to try out, so anyone can go to SparkToro and start running searches. The idea behind it is that SparkToro aggregates tens of millions of web and social profiles and makes them searchable so that you can extract lots of information about any describable audience on the web. You can learn what podcasts they listen to. You can see which websites they follow and engage with and visit. You can see what social accounts they engage with. You can see which YouTube channels they subscribe to, all sorts of data and a bunch of other information, insights about audiences. And you can do this for almost anyone, right? If you can describe an audience. So let's say you are trying to reach chemical engineers in the UK, or you're trying to reach architects in Los Angeles, or you have a new product for data scientists in the AI field. You can, if you can describe them or describe their interests or describe a source that they already follow, we can give you a whole bunch of information that you can then use to, do outreach for your launch or PR, do content marketing pitches, do persona building, do product, modify your products based on things, try and learn more about your audience so that you can go do surveys and interviews with them. Lots of folks have been using SparkToro actually in the podcast and YouTube sponsorship world. So just finding relevant podcasts and YouTube channels to sponsor, because that's a very perhaps you already know, right? It tends to be very high ROI. There's lots of podcasts that have lots of listenership and YouTube channels that have a bunch of reach, but advertising on them is dirt cheap. And so you can oftentimes get a really great deal. There's people who've been using it for just Facebook targeting, right? Trying to find groups that are interested in their topic matter and then porting those over to their Facebook audience builders. Lots of creative uses for the data, but we're really trying to be the data hub itself. And in terms of your second question, so it's been going interesting. We did our first early access launch at the end of February, and February was just before coronavirus had sort of taken hold in the United States and dominated at least the national conversation here. I think it had already been very, very prominent in Asia. But we did really well. We had like a 4 or 5% conversion rate. A huge tick up in subscribers. And then our next early access group was the middle of March. That performed much worse, about 20% as well. And our final early access groups and the launch performed closer to 0.4%. So conversion rates dropped about 90% across a similar randomized sample of interested people over the course of the COVID pandemic, which is pretty indicative of what's going on.
Yeah, I had a time to spend a little bit of time in the platform, and it just feels like a really new kind of fresh tool that I just personally haven't really seen in the market. So
I think this is one of the funny things is we're not exactly sure who our competitors are. At Moz, right, I had very obvious competitors. I think most businesses have really obvious competitors. With SparkToro, our competitor is sort of, we're replacing a lot of the hard work of, cyber stalking at scale or running surveys and trying to gather self-reported data, or trying to build your own crawler to fetch this information. And that's kind of unusual to be in this situation. We also we asked a bunch of people like yourself, right, in the marketing world, like, hey, what do you call this practice of discovering the sources your audience pays attention to so you can go do the right kinds of marketing to them? And people told us, oh, I do that work, but I have no name for it.
Right. Yeah.
Oh.
So you feel that need. Yeah.
We're trying to fill a need with no name, which I think is, again, challenging. You just think about it from the SEO perspective. We can't really rank for anything that's going to send us relevant traffic.
Yeah. Okay. But so congrats again for launching this, and congrats on launching it during this tricky time. But honestly, I think we know that you already have one experience in the bag already of starting a business, or maybe more accurately, switching a business model just right around the time of an economic downturn. And here you've done it again. And what do you say to those who are maybe reluctant to invest right now and are kind of waiting through for a healthier climate to spend? Is this the right approach?
I think the answer is it depends. Certainly, demand and spending in a bunch of areas, consumer and B2B, is down massively, right, across the economic spectrum. Perhaps not where you are, right, in Czech, but in the United States, it absolutely is, and I think in many places it will be for a long time. So, look, I think it makes sense to hold on to your investment, especially if you don't have a lot of cash and need to conserve that in order to maintain your team and your own income. Casey and I, my co-founder, and I are looking at SparkToro, and we're sort of saying like, we obviously anticipated we would be launching in not another depression, right? Not a terrible economic climate, and so our predictions were very different 3 months ago than what they're going to be today, and we have to account for that, and I think that means less spending for us too. So I think it makes sense to adjust your investment accordingly. What I would just say is, if you can do a decent job of predicting how much your market's spending is going to be down, you don't want to cut your own budget, right? Your own marketing and sales and growth budget by more than that, because then you're going to lose opportunity. And if you can maintain it higher than your competition, right, knowing that your competition is also going to be pulling back, if you can maintain it higher, you may be able to catch demand as it grows again,
Hmm.
right? So it's sort of like investing at
Yeah.
the bottom of the stock market. You can potentially, if you do it well and do it wisely, you can catch a wave of growth that happens when these sorts of things rebound.
Yeah. We just got really fresh data on this on the spending on Facebook and
Hmm.
Instagram, obviously, and it's really interesting to see it kind of picking up in key regions now. Finally, after some time, so it looks like a little bit of confidence is growing into the spending that you're talking about here.
Yeah, we're seeing. I've been looking at some of that data as well, and we've been seeing, at least in the U.S., like a shift of where the spend is coming from.
Mm.
So essentially, whereas especially in worlds like raw display advertising and retargeting and social display and that kind of thing,
Yeah.
sectors like travel have not rebounded at all, but e-commerce is picking up some of that slack. Events have not rebounded at all. Concerts haven't
Mhm.
rebounded. Um, perhaps no
Yeah.
surprise.
Yeah.
Even a lot of
Yeah.
elective medical hasn't rebounded yet,
Mm.
but other sources and sectors, food and gaming and yeah, a lot of technology stuff, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and some new creative stuff have come to take the place.
Yeah,
But
and maybe that actually kind of leads me to the next question. Because when we were speaking the first time around, we were talking about like what is this going to change? So obviously there's going to be a move to e-commerce, a couple of other verticals that you just mentioned, more probably digital consumption, more media consumption. What else would you add to the list right now?
yeah, um, I think I think we've been seeing um, some activity that suggests that future, let's see, what do I want to call that? Like pent up demand is a real thing.
Uh
So
huh.
we were looking at some of the data for um, cruise lines and hotels and flights for fall, winter, spring of next year, and those um, those sectors have actually seen a lot of demand. It's just future
Huh.
demand. It's basically delayed demand. So one thing that was really interesting, there was a stat, I think it was on Business Insider, about the cruise lines and how a bunch of the cruise lines had basically over for the next 6 months, they offer folks who've already purchased a cruise the option to either delay their cruise to a future date or
Hmm.
to get a refund of some kind. And uh, I think it's 75% have said, I want to delay my cruise 6 months or 9 months. Only 25% have said, I want a refund, which is incredible,
Okay. Yeah.
right?
Surprising.
Kind of mind blowing to think, oh, people may be processing this pandemic as a short term, like things will get back to normal. And when they do, I still want to do all the things that were on my agenda, as opposed to complete. I think the big fear was that it would create a full mental model shift where people
Hmm.
just didn't want to do those things anymore.
Yeah, it kind of didn't necessarily happen in some regards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and there's another thing that's kind of happened that I find it really interesting to observe is that during this times of crises or just any usually kind of tough times or times of constraint, you see new business ideas develop or new business models emerge. And one that I love is the dairy delivery model, which maybe kind of resurrected rather than a new
Yeah.
model, or the food subscription boxes. Anything new that you've spotted in this time?
Hmm. Gosh, I have seen a bunch of interesting ones, but I've seen a lot of online events with friends. So
Mhm.
my wife Geraldine was invited to the board of a local theater here in Seattle, and they have been doing um, sort of the equivalent of live theater performances, but over the web. I found that pretty fascinating.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. You can see some of that stuff making its way into, video content and advertising, as folks have tried to deal with the fact that they can't be on site and on location to film anything. So that I think
Yeah.
certainly changes. But yeah, I'm trying to think about habits that might change long term. I mean, um, my guess is we will see some around food. We'll see
Mhm.
some around um, health. I think that masks, just in general, are going to become a much more accepted part of everyday society.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's probably a really good thing. I don't know about you, but I travel. I travel a ton for speaking and conferences, and I get horribly sick all the time. Like I just, I'm the kind of person who has like 9 or 10 colds a year, um,
God.
and I hate it. I've been uh, very very healthy the last 3 months, which is super nice. It's like a welcome change.
Yeah. So some habits like this agreed. I hope that the masks stay, and it looks like it in a lot of many parts of the world that is the case, and here included. Uh,
Yeah, I think there's also going to be sectors that refuse to be digitized, refuse to accept technology, refuse to sort of accept remote work that are going to change more substantially now. I saw today, for example, the Supreme Court is going to stream all of their oral arguments, which they've never done before. At least the United
Interesting.
States Supreme Court has never done that. There's going to be there are colleges and universities, right, that are offering um, online courses that never have before. Some of those are going to remain online after this. I have no doubt that there's going to be people who don't take up um, going back to a
Yeah.
physical location.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit briefly about well, forecasting? I mean, that's something that really every business has to do to some degree, and I'm curious, how are you forecasting now, and maybe SparkToro, and what your expectations are, and maybe as someone, you already had to navigate a business through a recession. What would be your recommendations for CEOs or CMOs or anyone really tasked to plan a couple of quarters ahead?
Yeah, I think the wise move is to look at your year over year data, and then to basically analyze based on the loss that you've seen from March and April, and to have a rolling forecast such that you don't try and predict more than, or sorry, you essentially create a model that says we have a higher certainty around the next 3 months and lower
Hmm.
certainty around the periods after that. And so basically,
Hmm.
you are um, building your forecast and then revising it every 3 months. And I think that's really useful, not only to your potentially, right, if you have them, investors and board of directors, but
Hmm.
also internally to your team and staff, right? So if you say, hey,
Yeah.
business was down 60% in March and year over year, and it was down 40% year over year in April. So we're going to make an estimate that things don't recover that fast, that March to April's growth or non-loss uh, doesn't go that fast in May, and we're going to say business will be down 30% and 25% in June and 20% in July, et cetera, right? From
Hmm.
from year
Hmm.
over year, and then you revise again in August, right, based on how actual performance went, and you build your budgets and your spend around those kinds of things. I think that's a pretty healthy. It's a little conservative, um,
Hmm.
but I think it's a healthy way to play it. What I would say is, if you have the cash or the profitability to do it, you make an intentional decision to invest beyond what's profitable so
Mm-hmm.
that you build up future demand, right? Looking at things like the travel industry and cruise line industry and that type of stuff, if we're recognizing that we are experiencing a period of contraction that is not entirely organic, that's essentially,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a full loss in demand, it is just a delay in demand, at least some of it. If you invest now in building up things like your organic traffic, so that when, as things recover and conversion rates go back up, you are capturing more of the market. If you invest in building your email list, if you invest in creating future demand through advertising and marketing and content and messaging and all those kinds of things, you will reap the rewards of that just in the
Mm-hmm.
future. And so now is an awesome time to invest in building up future demand.
Yeah, and us being a social media kind of focused, maybe podcast. Where does the social fit into this? Is it in the kind of keeping that demand rolling, or
Yeah.
yeah?
Absolutely. I mean, social media has been the primary way that we've actually built up our demand for SparkToro. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Social sent, as much traffic and as many signups to us as search has, and of course, we both know that it's probably sent much more, because so much of social traffic is dark traffic, unattributable due to the lack of referrer string. So, you know, we um, we've basically been using social to build up demand for our early access, our beta, and then the launch um, with SparkToro, and that was a very successful strategy for us. We put whatever 20,000 people onto our early access list, and then
Mm-hmm.
we've been able to use that as a like great email marketing channel. Granted, if we had launched
Yeah.
earlier, or maybe a few months from now, I think we would have done much better with that group. But it's yeah, still work.
May I ask kind of a tougher question, maybe, and a tough question that many CMOs right now actually have to uh, answer, and that's which parts of marketing are essential during a recession, and which are non-essential. What are your thoughts?
Mhm. Sadly, like a lot of things in marketing, the answer is it depends. My bias is to take the most, what do I want to call that? Uh, the hardest to get right forms of paid marketing and pull back on those right now.
Mm-hmm.
So things like, Google ads and Facebook ads, I think that those make sense to pull back a little on, because of especially if you are reaching groups with those that you could otherwise reach with organic messaging,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you know that conversion rates are down. Because taking
Mm-hmm.
money away from paid when it doesn't have a positive ROI, or when the ROI is lower, and putting it into organic, where it takes longer to build up the investment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and by organic, I mean content, I mean social media, I mean SEO, I mean PR, I mean your email list, right? All of those,
Right.
even whatchamacallit, even partnerships, and co-marketing and guest editorials and all that type of stuff. But taking money from those places, especially Google Ads, where you don't know if all the keywords that Google is showing you for are actually super relevant, and the conversion rates drop considerably. I think that type of spend it's so easy to ramp back up, right? As
Mm-hmm.
opposed to pulling dollars from your content efforts, or your social efforts, or your brand efforts, where it's much harder to just flip a switch and turn that back on.
Yeah. So essentially it's kind of the content marketing side of your business is what you're selling right now, as opposed to the acquisition side of paid.
Yeah, I mean, content marketing is one tactic in a whole host of tactics
Hmm.
that I would be investing in. But yes, that's
Yeah.
generally the idea, is to put it into take it from paid channels, especially those where conversion rates have dropped and where the ROI is much lower, and put it into the relatively high ROI but long
Hmm.
term, take a while to build channels of organic.
Yeah, that's what kind of my intuition was telling me as well. And when I was looking at our recent trends reports, I was a little bit surprised to see such a steep increase in spending. And I don't know what you think, but my thought was maybe that some of the actually advertising that was maybe distributed for outdoor advertising and some print and maybe some kind of sports advertising budgets that may be shifted to digital.
Yeah, that
Um,
wouldn't surprise me at all, right? Digital is where all the attention is. And we did see, I don't know if you saw this, but we saw and are still seeing that um, ad inventory is way up and prices had dropped off significantly. So,
mhm,
we talked earlier about how some of that is recovering now, but we still see in a bunch of sectors, and even just in Facebook ads themselves,
mhm.
right? CPMs that are way, way down from February.
Yeah. Um, what do you think if you kind of looked at the world pre coronavirus and post coronavirus? How are the marketing departments different in those two worlds?
Hmm. Interesting. I mean, my guess is that at least during and probably for a while post, we're going to see less spend on agencies, less spend, unfortunately, on strategy, even though that is probably not a wise thing to pull back on. We're probably going to see smaller teams, so fewer staff
Hmm.
to do the work and more work expected of the smaller team that exists. I think that always happens in recessions and contractions, right?
Hmm.
Whatever
Yeah.
management basically says, you have to get 70% as much done with 50% the resources. And so everybody gets um, kind of doubly taxed, and it's not like your
Right.
pay is
Right.
going up for that either. So I think you're going to see a lot of burnout. And then my suspicion is that as things recover, you will start to see some um, disruption, because
Hmm.
essentially there'll be more, as there always is in recessions and depressions, there'll be more entrepreneurship, people who've lost their job or who leave their job um, to start new businesses. And at least I certainly hope that's the case. And then you see the efforts of that entrepreneurship
Hmm.
disrupting old tactics with new ones, right? So if I mean, obviously, this is a self-serving example, right? But what SparkToro sort of falls into this realm of, we hope people don't go back to paying a market research agency 50 grand for a one-time, audience survey of 1,200 people in their target
Hmm.
customer group, and instead are like, let me see if I can just run one of these SparkToro searches and get that data.
Yeah. I can see how that could be a viable solution, definitely, especially in a time of cutting back on spending as well,
Sure.
especially.
I mean, you look at something like, in the social media world, I think True Social Metrics and Buffer and Hootsuite, right, and a bunch of those companies that automated a bunch of data collection or analysis or
Mhm.
tasks inside of social. Those were all kicking off right around the recession of '08.
Yeah, social bakers included. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's an interesting time. Any kind of maybe final points to make here, and also a little bit maybe where people can sign up for SparkToro or where to follow what you guys are doing?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, my final message would be around that future demand building. I think, well, A, I think that's something I should probably write a blog post about, but B, my recommendation to anyone in the marketing world right now is to find where pent-up demand exists in your field and for your customers, and be prepared to change your marketing behavior and potentially even your product strategy to be able to serve that and prepare to serve that in the future. Because if you
Hmm.
don't, your competitors are going to capture that sometime in the next 3 to 6 months if you're not the one capturing it. So I think you have this sort of beautiful moment, um, to be able to take advantage of that and turn what is, really terrible lemons into some lemonade, um,
Hmm.
at least a little bit for your future, and hopefully make your company be able to come out of this a little better than others. As far as where to reach me, I am most active on Twitter, where I'm at Randfish, and you can go to SparkToro.com and run free searches and see if the product is interesting to you or your team. We would certainly love that.
Yeah, well, be sure to include the link in the podcast description. And well, it's always such a pleasure to speak to you. And
Yeah.
yeah, well, thanks for taking the time to walk us through your thoughts on where we are right now as marketers. And yeah, I hope things are really pick up very quickly for SparkToro.
Oh, thank you. And Mantas, I hope you and everyone who's listening stays safe and well. I know it's scary out there. We're certainly keeping our fingers crossed that the worst has passed.
Thank you.